at 6, as we just left 5, which is obviously Venus. And 6, of course, is when I say flesh and spirit, some people would also try to say flesh, or excuse me, feminine and masculine, and that wouldn't be correct. 6 is not a masculine number in the sense that two interlacing triangles or two interlacing fields of energy coming into contact would create energy. So they would have to be opposing poles, positive and negative, or male and female. But the reason why 6 is looked at as a masculine symbol is because 6 is related to the spirit world. And flesh is always seen, whether it's a male flesh or a female flesh, as feminine, while spirits are seen as masculine or like fire. And so that's something that you really have to understand with the occult, is that this way we interpret male and female doesn't apply to how the occult works. What does work, though, is understanding when you're difference between when you're dealing with flesh and spirit. So what 6 has everything to do with is how to bring in two opposing spiritual forces in order to begin to create and generate ethereal energy. That is its root. And ethereal energy's byproduct is pure energy, which of course is what we call water and what we need to live. So to show you that this is not something that the demigods and the individuals who are writing these books have cooked up, you have to look at the water crystal, and you have to see that energy and life in this world is also equivalent to this particular design. And so this, of course, would be why something or someone would attempt to usurp this symbol and say they are the creators of this symbol, or they are the originators of this symbol, or this symbol equates to their knowledge. So remember that this is something that is a universal system. The sun shines on everything that will allow itself to be pierced by its rays. This type of interlacing triangles, which has everything to do with the spirit or ether, has everything to do with your aura and the system around your body that creates energy and keeps you fully conscious on multiple planes, the hyperdimensional vehicle, or what we call at times the torus, which corresponds to the torso or the energy area of our body. That's why Taurus, the constellation, was looked at as where the 7 sisters of the Pleiades were, and that was the place where life came from according to their mythos. But their mythos is highly externalized. What it's really talking about is the torus shape or the donut shaped field that is emitted around the body's energy system. So we'll watch as the priestcraft attempts to, or actually succeeds for a while in systematically divesting the natural world and universe of all of its knowledge and claiming that they are the originators of it. This begins with the language of Hebrew, and I actually put this chart or this collage together just for this particular reason and just to show several things at one time. But what you'll see is that Hebrew actually is a Megan star, as it's sometimes referred to, or Sri Yantra, drop down upon itself, meaning that if you took all 22 letters and you dropped them down, it would equal this same symbol of water. So this is how Hebrew became a language of power and how it was synonymous with now the Kabbalah and the evocation, etc. But to see exactly how long this has been used, way before the people who are calling themselves Jews were calling them that, themselves that, way before this symbol was used by anyone named Solomon. If you understand the riddle, then of course you can interpret it a lot deeper. But realistically, this particular symbol, which I said is found in nature, was also used throughout time. You even see here on the left an extraterrestrial component. You see here in the modern time it even being used as the recycling system, or which is basically regeneration. You see it as the monogram of Christ, or what's called the chi row, because it has a lot to do with chi and gold energy or building up energy. You see it here in a temple as an interlacing spiral, which connects to the DNA and how to tap into the DNA. So again, we're talking about a symbol of so much immense power that anyone trying to interpret this and take this as their own would be basically capsizing underneath it, meaning that you can't take such powerful symbolism and say, oh, this is something that I created, and it has such an immense level of connection to it, because eventually you'll bottleneck under the responsibility. And that's, of course, what's happening to the controllers as we're getting a lot more intelligent about what's really going on here, and we expect more out of our reality. Also notice here within this ancient symbolism on this temple that the pentagram in its upside down position, which is how it was shown first, especially by the Pythagoreans, it was never pointed straight up. But you see there's a knowledge here of Venus, and then also this planet of the hexagram, which we'll find out later is connected to Saturn. So this is, again, knowledge that you won't really find all in one place, but if you go and look for it, as you see here, the louver or the floor is, or the floor here in this Catholic cathedral is actually laid out just like the water crystal that I showed you earlier. So what you're finding is a counterfeiter is attempting to usurp all the knowledge through the symbolism. And we're going to another slide here. Now, here's how we break down letters and words over at the Resistance. Of course, we're cipherist, meaning that we actually have the code that cracks all words. And we utilize that in order to get us to the truth. It's not something that when someone talks to us, it's not something that we have to believe. We should find a redundification of it everywhere, at least on all corresponding dimensions. So what you'll find here is that the X, or actually many of the symbols that are used in the English language, are symbols that mean something entirely different than what we're using them for. And of course, that could be extremely disempowering. And that is, of course, a major key to the disempowerment of what's going on in our reality, is that we don't really understand what we're saying at times. And so this causes us to evoke or invoke things that we don't really want. So understand that the symbol of the X in itself was also the symbol of the axe god. But as you see, the word axe and X sound the same. And you also remember there's a faction called the Axis. And of course, this is the single X here. And you'll see the single X equals two V's, or two triangles. And then you'll see when those two triangles come together, that they make this Megan star again. So you can see that why X means this symbol of energy. Okay. Now, when you take two X's, and this is something you can do right there on a pen and pad in front of you. You take two X's and you draw those two X's in opposite to each other, and you'll get this symbol, which you see all the time on the shields of the royalty, or you'll get this symbol. So still realize where all of these symbols are coming from when it comes to X and axe and all of that are individuals who have taken the knowledge of energy and chose to use it a specific kind of way, and then try to teach everyone that that's the only way that it can be used. So just remember this particular chart here, because it's going to serve you in the future to understand why you find Mary XMAS, and Christ, of course, is removed in X, because of course Christ and X are the same being. X is then put in, and you have now the XMAS, which I talked about as, again, mass meaning a ritual of death, as in the Catholic Mass. So you see, Merry Christmas is not so merry, but it is, because remember, it's Mary with the child. We have Santa Claus, and most people know that Santa Claus is related directly and through anagram to Satan, but they also never realize who this character Satan really is and how it connects to the entity known as Nergal, also Marduk. We find an X on the head and an axe in the hand. I couldn't create this myself. We find an 8-pointed star here, which is, of course, the star of Ilu. We find the fleur-de-lis here. So again, when you understand what they're doing or understand what they're doing, then you can interpret all of this, and you start to realize how many of these symbols roll together. That the axe or the X is actually synonymous after a while with the Sri Yantra, or the interlacing of two triangles, which we've proven more than enough here. But also another symbol, which is often goes overlooked, is also connected, which is what we call a swastika. And once again, the swastika is just two opposing forces coming together, or two energies that are going in the opposite direction coming together. And we see here that these are ancient busts of this type of engraving. So this is not something that was just invented by, the Rosicrucians, during the times of Alexandria. We find here now another symbol which connects the axe and the axis to the swastika. Because what you'll learn later on is that when Hitler claimed to be an Aryan, you will find that he was accepting the Druid priesthood, which is, of course, the Druid priesthood of Lamas and Papas, and they're basically the world priesthood, and becoming involved in that. And so there wasn't a disconnection or a misinterpretation of the swastika by Hitler and the faction that he represented. They actually were working for the Green Gloves, or the individuals that were in Shambhala at that time and attempting to overthrow the world with the priestcraft again. We find here the symbolism being used together, which is, of course, the cross, which you'll see here, and then again the swastika you'll see here. And again, the cross is, of course, an X, showing that these symbols are synonymous and have been used since ancient times in conjunction with one another. You'll find in indigenous cultures, of course, the symbol being used. And so that means someone passed the knowledge to them. And this is where we get into the entire story of the migration of the knowledge out of the Indus Valley, or out of the Lemurian Empire, which is actually encapsulated, as we'll see later on, within the story of Abraham and Saraswati. And of course, Abraham, the Brahmin, and his wife Saraswati left the Indus Valley and went into the world, or left according to the Bible. Abraham and Sarah, of course, are the same character, left or Chaldea, and because of wanting to start a new priesthood, wanting to bring in a quote unquote a new God. So you can see that there's a repackaging of this message that has happened when there's an entry of or exit of a group of individuals leaving the Indus Valley, with the Lemurian knowledge, many of them Brahmins, also later on called Elohim, and then beginning to distribute this knowledge into the indigenous population, mainly under the yoke of worship. And of course, they went to these areas enslaving these people. Here we see the axe borne by Zeus, to show you the connection. And of course, Zeus is Deus, and Deus is Jesus, etc. All of the same being. Of course, we see here a modern rendition of Brahma, of course, with the white beard, which I call the Saturnalia Motif. Of course, Saturnalia Motif is always the white beard, like Santa Claus, or the gentleman on Harry Potter, and also on Lord of the Rings. You get this long white beard, and then you start to see where it all connects, because they always use the same symbolism. You see here the swastika being shown in the Aryan Empire with the fleur-de-lis, to show you that the Queen of Britain is utilizing Aryan symbolism and symbolism from ancient empires from Lemuria. And this, of course, is after the usurping during the time and the entry of the Atlantean Empire. So we see here CAIN, the wanderer. And of course, CAIN is a word that easily anagram and cross through other languages actually means CAIN. CAIN and Khan are synonymous. Khan and priest, Cohen. All of these words, king and CAIN, of course, are synonymous. Smith is synonymous. So what we find is an archetype of an individual, and as you see here in the belt and hammer, of a wanderer that has to leave the garden. And later on, you'll learn that garden was Persia. The beautiful gardens of Persia definitely cannot be denied. And sent into the land with the symbols, which is, of course, the swastikas and the 8-pointed stars, and all the symbols that they could conquer with. And because that's why I said, in these signs ye shall conquer. So let's keep going here. We see, of course, now the Aryan symbolism underneath the empire of Hitler with the eagle, which is really the most replete symbolism in itself and by itself. Wherever you see the eagle being used, which you'll find also, of course, in Buddhism, especially for the meditation symbols, then you understand that you're still dealing with what's called the double-headed eagle, or basically the dualistic God principle. We find in here CAIN, surrounded by an hexagon, smithing, meaning Tubal-Cain taught them how to shape and fashion swords. So generally, when Santa Claus came to people's land, it was with weapons. And at times, they left those weapons to the indigenous people to finish each other off. And so CAIN, Con, King, Coin, Cohen, all was synonymous with basically warlike beings. They brought war to the planet, taught how to war